Welcome to the Explainers. So, look, we've all grown up with these wild stories of legendary beasts, right? Those terrifying predators that haunt our nightmares, from fire-breathing dragons to vengeful spirits and savage werewolves. But today, we're doing something a little different. We are going to directly compare classic monster traits with real-world biology. We're going to put myth under the microscope and see what nature actually allows. Think about it. Nature has built animals that can literally survive outer space, fish that generate electricity out of nowhere, and octopuses that taste their food just by touching it with their arms. Evolution has had 4 billion years to build almost anything you can possibly imagine. So why, when it had all the right pieces just lying around, did it absolutely refuse to assemble the ultimate monster? Why no dragon? Section 1. Building the dragon's body. When we actually dissect the physical blueprints of this mythical beast, the grand illusion quickly falls apart. The mythical standard is a massive reptile that breathes fire, walks on 4 sturdy legs, and flies with 2 massive wings. That is a 6-limbed creature. But biological reality is incredibly strict. It enforces a hard and fast 4-limb rule. Every single animal with a backbone traces its lineage back to the very same 4-limbed fish that crawled out of the water 350 million years ago. You can have arms, or you can have wings. Nature does not hand out both. So a 6-limbed dragon physically breaks the foundational blueprint of backboned life. Okay, but what about the fire? 212 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature of boiling water. And, crazily enough, the exact temperature of the defensive spray from a bombardier beetle. When this little guy is threatened, it mixes chemicals inside its abdomen and blasts a boiling spray right at predators. It's the absolute closest thing to a flamethrower in the animal kingdom. But notice, it's a boiling liquid, not actual fire. No animal evolution has ever produced a biological mechanism to intentionally set something on fire. But the sheer size and the wings? Nature actually does have a dragon toolkit. We used to have the Quetzalcoatl, a flying reptile with a massive 36-foot wingspan that literally pole vaulted into the sky. We had Megalania down in Australia, a 23-foot venomous lizard. And today, we still have the Draco lizard, which uses its extra rib bones to glide 200 feet between trees. So the pieces totally exist. But nature's metabolic limits are a hard brick wall. Flying is the single most metabolically expensive thing an animal can do. It pushes a body to its absolute physical limits. There is simply zero energy left in that biological budget to also run a 212-degree chemical furnace in your chest, let alone scale the whole thing up to the size of a house without the animal's own weight just crushing its bones. Section 2. The monster's unforgiving memory. Now, if we pivot away from physical constraints and look at behavior, real biology absolutely backs up that terrifying trope of a beast holding an eternal grudge. Take crows, for example. Researchers once trapped a few crows while wearing a specific rubber mask. Years later, crows that weren't even alive during the original event will still dive bomb anyone wearing that mask. They literally inherit the grudge. Then you have horses. Show a horse a single photo of an angry human face, and hours later when that exact person walks in acting totally calm, the horse will warily monitor them specifically with its left eye, which is the eye wired directly to the brain's threat center. And finally, if a keeper pokes an octopus with a bristly stick, it remembers that specific uniform. It will dispense targeted retribution, blasting water right down that specific keeper's neck. These animals lock onto faces, and they keep score.
But the sheer scale of this memory, it's staggering. 26. Bonobos have actually been shown to recognize the faces of relatives they haven't seen in 26 years, even when half the face was deliberately hidden behind a mask. The monster's unforgiving memory, that beast stalking the woods that never forgets a slight or a face, is a deeply ingrained biological reality, not just a myth.
Section 3. Taming the savage beast. When we think about the classic werewolf trope, the savage, untamable predator lurking inside, we have to look at how domestication biologically rewrites that monster. Back in 1959, Dmitry Belyaev started this wild experiment with Siberian silver foxes. He took a deeply wild, aggressive predator and did just one thing. He only allowed the calmest foxes to breed. By generation 6, these foxes were actively licking researchers' hands. By generation 12, the stress hormones in their bloodstream were literally cut in half. And by generation 30 and beyond, these formerly savage beasts were completely tame, actively seeking out human affection. He proved for sure that you can rebuild a wild predator into an animal that genuinely loves people in less than a human lifetime, just by continuously selecting for calm.
And here is where it gets crazy. Belyaev only ever selected for friendliness, right? But all these entirely new traits just came bundled with it. Floppy ears, curled tails, spotted coats, rounded snouts. Scientists called us the domestication syndrome. By just turning down the biological dial on fear, Belyaev accidentally altered the fox's neural crest cells. Now, these cells control the fear glands, sure, but they also control fur color, ear stiffness, and snout shape. Changing the internal chemistry completely rewrote the creature's external physical appearance. A single ancient act of selecting against fear. That one thing changed the whole game. I mean, this exact process happened to wolves naturally over 15,000 years. The friendliest wolves crept closer to our human camps and effectively bred the fear right out of themselves. They traded the beast's aggressive instincts for a biological oxytocin loop, even gaining a brand new eye muscle just to give us that classic pleading puppy dog look. The werewolf myth tells of a man cursed to become a savage beast, but biology shows us the exact reverse. The savage beast literally redesigning its own DNA to become our most devoted companion. Section 4. Monsters in our minds. So if biology refused to give us a real, physical dragon or mythical monster, where did the psychological blueprint for these creatures actually come from? Well, to understand our ancient fears, we have to look at how we lived. Anthropologist George Murdoch studied thousands of human societies and found that 80% allowed a man more than one wife. Only 20% were strictly monogamous. Ancient human relationships were incredibly complex. In fact, the Bari people of Venezuela even believed a single child could have multiple fathers. They accepted 2 men as providers, which is wild because it dramatically increased a child's chance of surviving to age 15 from 64% all the way up to 80%. Our ancestors lived in these wandering, intensely bonded, but highly competitive social groups.
Because we lived packed shoulder to shoulder, out in the open with no walls, researchers found that the deadliest force in the ancient camp wasn't actually starvation, or even the wild beasts prowling in the dark. It was the violence triggered by a partner who strayed, and the absolute destructive jealousy that followed. The real threat was often betrayal right inside our own camps. We had to be incredibly hypervigilant constantly just to survive both our neighbors and nature.
And that constant hypervigilance towards nature brings us to a fascinating concept: the stitched-together predator. Anthropologist David E. Jones proposed this incredible theory based on vervet monkeys. See, these monkeys have 3 distinct alarm screams for their 3 main predators: big cats, eagles, and snakes. Jones argues that primates, like our early ancestors, were hunted by these exact same 3 killers for millions of years. And that immense trauma was burned incredibly deep into our brains. Think about it. If you assemble those ancient nightmares, what do you actually get? Step 1. You take the fangs and the raking claws of a big cat. Step 2. You bolt on the wings and the terrifying killing dive of an eagle. And step 3. Wrap the whole shebang in the scaly, coiling body of a snake. When you stitch together the ingrained memories of the exact predators that hunted our ancestors in the dark, you have literally just built a dragon. This is exactly why cultures separated by massive oceans somehow invented the exact same monster. Which leaves us with this final, kind of chilling question. Are the monsters we fear just stitched together memories of the predators that used to hunt us? Evolution never allowed the dragon to exist out there in the wild because physically it just couldn't. Instead, we took the real predators we barely survived, carried them out of the wild, and locked them forever inside our own minds.